Welcome to Plant Your Seed. I'm your host, Fred Ferris. On each episode, we share stories of how ordinary people have transformed their lives. Each story is compassionate, each story is authentic, and each story is a transformation. Here are the stories of the people who are changing our world by transitioning to a plant-based diet. Today on Plant Your Seed, joining us from Virginia, we have John Oberg. John is an animal advocate, influencer, and social media professional dedicated to making the world a kinder place for animals by utilizing the power of social media. Welcome, John.
Hey, Fred. So good to be here.
Thanks for being here on Plant Your Seed. How and when did you transition to a plant-based diet?
I went vegan in 2009, which would be almost 13 years ago now. I consider myself an animal lover for all of my life, but it wasn't until I was around 2021 that I really considered how my diet could reflect the values I had. And at that point, I decided to go vegetarian and eventually vegan.
When you went vegetarian, did you think about how it was affecting the animals?
Yes. So I definitely considered how animals were being impacted through my food choices. And what happened was essentially I watched a film. There were a lot of smaller things that happened over the course of my life that led up to this, but sort of one of the last things that happened was I was essentially confronted with the idea that if I loved animals, I should stop eating animals. And I had never really understood that concept or thought about that concept prior to my life, in my life. And so what I ended up doing was going vegetarian based on this principle alone, the principle that if I loved animals, I probably shouldn't be eating animals. And it wasn't until about 10 months later that I watched a documentary called Earthlings, which is a documentary produced in, I believe, 2006, narrated by Joaquin Phoenix. And in this film, it talks about the ways in which humans exploit animals. And I learned that farm animals don't just live good lives and have one bad day at the slaughterhouse. They live lives of misery from birth to death. And also, it wasn't just animals raised for meat, like chickens, fish, cows, and pigs. It was also dairy cows, egg-laying hens, and others. And so I realized the best course of action would be to become a vegan.
How did that make you feel when you found out all that information?
Well, it was shocking and disheartening to think that I considered myself an animal lover for decades, and it wasn't until I was at the age of 20 or 21 that I was finally at a position where I could make a change that was going to reflect these values, like the fact that I had been eating animals for all those years and just not aware of what these animals were enduring. It was just shocking to me, and so while on one hand it felt really shocking to know that these animals endure this horrible suffering and that the vast majority of people out there are eating animals and not really aware of the situation, I also felt a sort of sense of empowerment because I realized this is a huge opportunity for me and this is going to be my life's calling to get people to become aware of what's happening and to inspire them to change.
Can you take us back to that moment when you're watching Earthlings and all of a sudden you realize what's really going on?
It was shock, really. It was, how can this be happening? How are more people not already vegan? And how could these industries do such a good, effective job of pulling the wool, for lack of a better term, pulling the wool over people's eyes, right? How could these industries hide the truth from people? And it was something that really lit a fire within me and made me realize that it was really going to be my mission to get people to learn the truth. And so as distressing as it was to learn the truth, it was also empowering at the same time. And it's such a joy to meet others like yourself who want to raise awareness of how animals are being treated and to encourage others to live in a way that reflects the values that they already have.
How do the industries, quote, pull the wool over people's eyes?
The industry does a really fantastic job, unfortunately, of hiding what animals endure. They pump millions and millions of dollars into advertising, and much of this advertising paints a picture of animal agriculture that many people want to believe. They want to believe that farm animals, are living happy, enjoyable lives who eventually pass away and are eaten. But you and I and many of your listeners know the truth. And the truth is that farm animals live horrible lives from birth to death. Essentially, every day is full of misery in one way or another. It could be just absolute lack of mental stimulation. It can be physical trauma and abuse, emotional trauma and abuse through the ways in which humans interact with animals and force animals to interact with each other in horrible situations. So it's just really tremendously bad what farm animals endure in today's world.
Now, don't we have laws against false advertising? So wouldn't that be false advertising showing these cows being, in this beautiful pasture and having this great life when that's not really the way it is?
Yeah, well, the meat and dairy industries are incredibly powerful, and they have done a really fantastic job over decades and even centuries of implementing or putting themselves in the position of power and influence. And they have a hugely disproportionate amount of influence over our laws, over our lobbying, over society's attitudes towards what they're doing to animals. And all of those years of brainwashing essentially has really led to a system where they have all of the power, whether that's legal or otherwise. And that puts us in the position where we, as animal advocates, need to use whatever tools at our disposal to try and break down these walls that people have up, to break down the lies and misleading ways in which industries claim they treat animals, and do so in a way that's going to win over the public.
How did you become an animal advocate?
So I became an animal advocate after watching Earthlings. I decided this is my life's calling. I want to get involved with animal advocacy. And right away, I realized it's great that I'm vegan now. That's cool. But you know what? That means, let's say I live another 60 years on this planet. That's a net. I'm being net neutral, right? I'm not causing any more harm, but at the same time, I'm not really reducing any harm. And I realized, you know what? If I get other people to make this decision, then that is me actually saving animals. And so I decided to get involved with animal advocacy locally there in Phoenix, Arizona, where I was going to college at the time. There was a group doing something called leafletting. So where they would go to college campuses and busy public corners and hand out leaflets. And these leaflets talked about how farm animals are being treated and the benefits and the ways in which you can eat vegan. And I handed out many, many leaflets as a college student, as a volunteer. I was so many so that I was eventually hired by an organization called Vegan Outreach to travel around North America handing out leaflets. I handed out 400,000 leaflets, and what I eventually did was I transitioned from handing out leaflets in person to focusing on digital outreach, specifically by using social media.
Mm-hmm.
And social media has really become my main force for good.
Now, we know that social media has a tremendous reach, but can it be as effective as talking to someone person to person?
Well, the huge benefit of social media is the incredible reach And the way that I look at animal advocacy is that it's a numbers game. So, uh, as much as I would love to focus on individual person to person outreach, and I think that it is effective, and there are definitely times for that. The benefit of using social media as an approach to animal advocacy is the fact that you can reach exponentially more people. Just like with a podcast, you can reach many, many people all around the globe in an instant. Whereas with person to person outreach, it takes a lot more resources. And the fact is, animals are facing a really, really tough world, a world in which we need to do everything we can to make as much of an impact for them as possible. And using social media in a way that's effective and can reach hundreds, thousands, millions of people in a given year is a really fantastic way of making a really, really big difference for animals.
What was it that made you realize the power and potential of social media?
So about 7, 8, 9 years ago, I was a full-time leafletter. I was traveling around North America from college to college, handing out leaflets, and I loved it, and I found it to be effective. And I still do think that leafletting is an effective form of animal advocacy. But my mom got sick with cancer, and so I took a hiatus from traveling to take care of her full time. And I could no longer travel, and so the opportunity arose to actually take over the social media presence for the organization that I'd been working for, Vegan Outreach.
Hmm.
And I kind of reluctantly agreed to do it. But what I quickly realized, Fred, was that in just a day of social media advocacy, I could reach as many people as I could in an entire lifetime of handing out leaflets.
Hmm.
And so it was that moment that I was like, you know what? I love leafletting, but the biggest way that I can make an impact as an animal advocate is through social media.
Now, I read a stat that said about 1 in 6 people in the world have seen something that you've posted. How does that make you feel?
Well, it does make me feel good because it shows the power of social media, and and it also shows that I'm just a regular guy. I don't have a PhD in social media science. I'm not paid to run ads. I'm just someone who saw the social media landscape and really adjusted and tweaked my approach over time, day after day after day, really worked to build up a following and worked to build up a presence in which I could get as many views as possible of really, really important content. And so over my 8 or 9 years of social media advocacy for different organizations, I've had a lot of posts go really viral. And the reason this content goes viral, Fred, is because it's content that people are shocked to see. People most people don't really know the true horrors that farm animals endure on a daily basis. Most people truly believe that farm animals live decent lives. And so, us as advocates have a really great opportunity of reaching the general public about the truth about what's going on.
Where do you post most often?
The three main platforms that I focus my most attention on are Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. And Twitter and Facebook are especially the places where I make the biggest impact, and that's largely due to the share button. So on Twitter, it's called retweet button. On Facebook, it's called the share button. And these tools allow other people who see my posts to share them to their feeds, and then that exponentially increases the number of views that any post gets.
What do you feel is the ripple effect of your work, and how does it make you feel when you help people make a change?
The ripple effect of my work is essentially that when one person sees this content, and again, I'm not posting, you know, pictures uh, of water glasses. I'm posting, photos and videos of what farm animals are enduring behind the closed doors of factory farms and slaughterhouses. Not just that, but that's a big part of it. And so most people don't know that this is happening. Most people are almost totally unaware. And what that means is that I am regularly shocking people. I am regularly blowing people's minds. And what that does is that some of those people will go vegan right then, but a lot of those people won't, and that will be one of several things over the course of their journey to eventually becoming vegan or vegetarian or just cutting back on meat. And so there's a wide range of reactions, but beyond just how this impacts them, they can also have ripple effects by influencing others. So just like it was Earthlings that I saw 13 years ago that had an impact on me, someone seeing my post will be impacted, tomorrow or next week or next year, and then they will influence other people. And so the ways in which we can just totally influence and have so many ripple effects is truly the beautiful part about animal advocacy.
How often do you post?
I post, I tend to post about daily on Twitter, daily on Facebook, and once every 2 or 3 days on Instagram. And this is about the most that I can do with the resources I have at hand. If I had more resources, I would probably post more often, but that is what I can do now, and that is a number of posts in which I find to be an effective way of getting my message out there.
Have you found that shocking people is more effective than, say, what we call the soft sell?
I actually find the soft sell to be important as well, and it's actually for that reason that I do a blended approach, where at times I will shock people, at times I will have a softer approach and a softer tone, and sometimes I'll have different asks. And this is strategic because I want to reach different segments of my audience. Some
Mm.
audience members will really react well if they see certain kinds of content. Others might be a little bit more like putting up their hands a little bit and taking a step back. But it's for them that I post other kinds of maybe happier content. And so it's really posting a blend. And this blended approach is part of the reason that I've had so much success over the years in getting people to reconsider their food choices.
Is there an up and coming outlet that you would suggest to listeners to use and get the message out?
Well, social media is an ever changing landscape. Social media is always changing the ways in which each platform operates, their own features, what they prioritize in algorithms, and then, of course, the number and varying social media platforms themselves. So I don't think that any social media advocate should sit on their laurels and just expect that whatever they're using is going to be the platform that stays popular for the rest of their life. So I definitely recommend having a spread out approach and actually focusing on different social media platforms. Not all of them necessarily, and some platforms are going to make more sense for you to focus on than others. But definitely always keep an eye out on new social media platforms. So, for example, if you have a big Facebook and Instagram presence, also dabble with Twitter and TikTok and LinkedIn and see how your advocacy works there.
Now, people are always talking about the algorithm. How does the algorithm affect what we see?
So once upon a time, about 10 years ago, social media posts were seen in the order in which they were posted. So if you followed me on Instagram, Fred, and I posted something, and then let's say Susie posted something right after me. When you got in your newsfeed, you would see Susie's post, then you'd see my post, and that was it. What happened was that social media platforms really recognized that they needed people to stay on their platforms. Why? Because they make money from advertising. So the
Hmm.
longer that you are on their platform, the more opportunities they have to show you ads, which means more money for them. And so what did they think? They thought it's going to be important for people to see posts that keep them on the platform. And we think that we know this better than they do. And so they said, Fred, I don't care what you think you want to see. I'm going to show you what I think you want to see. And they basically essentially figured out through the ways in which you engage, the ways in which you like and comment and share posts, that the kinds of content that you want to see that'll keep you on the platform longer. And everybody is on this battlefield essentially. And so when you post, you can't just depend on people seeing it chronologically like you once could. You now have to assume that your post is only going to be seen by people if it gets engagement. And so it's really important to think about every single post that you're putting out there and ask yourself, are people going to engage with this post? And the answer is no. It's probably not really worth posting most of the time. Of course, there'll always be exceptions, but in general, you want to post content that is more likely to get engagement because that means more of your posts are going to be seen on a regular basis.
What is it that people have a difficult time aligning their actions with their values?
People have a difficult time aligning their values and their behavior largely because of ignorance. And that ignorance comes from not understanding how to do these things. So, for example, it makes sense for people to everybody should be vegan, right? Because pretty much everybody opposes animal cruelty. That's actually the beautiful part about animal advocacy and vegan advocacy is that we don't even need to argue with people because they already are on our side because they already oppose animal cruelty and the evidence is clear that farm animals endure a lot of cruelty on their way to our place. And so the argument is simple. Now, getting people to actually make the change is when it becomes more complex. And what we need to do is to get people to understand not just the why, but also the how. And a lot of people just don't understand how easy it is in 2022 to eat more vegan food. Now, not everybody has the same resources or the same or in the same life situation. So the varying levels of ease are different for everyone. But in general, it is an era currently that we've had to have access to vegan food like we've never had before. And it is so easy for more people to eat vegan at least more often. And the more that we can show people this and to get people to realize that this is the way to be, the more effective we are in moving the ball forward for animals.
What are some of the ways that people can advocate for animals on social media?
There are a variety of ways in which people can advocate for animals on social media. They can share posts from others, like me, for example. So somebody might go to my Twitter profile and retweet my tweets so that my tweets show up in their news feeds of the people, so that the people who follow them will see my posts. They can also talk about their own journey, and they can talk about the vegan food that they're eating. They can talk about the animal who inspired them to become vegan. They can talk about their origin story and what inspired them to become a vegetarian or vegan. They can talk about the horrors that farm animals endure in today's world. They can share this podcast episode and talk about the ways in which this episode or previous episodes have really influenced and impacted them. There's such a wide variety of ways in which animal advocates can use social media to exponentially increase their voice.
Now let's get back to your origin story. What were some of the changes that you saw after going vegan, both mentally and physically?
For me, the biggest change, mentally or physically, was really just feeling a weight lifted off of my shoulders. And that weight was living in a way that truly reflects who I am. And I always consider myself an animal lover, but I ate animals for over 20 years of my life. And I had never really taken into consideration how that choice and those choices were really backwards to my philosophy as an animal lover. And so becoming a vegan made me realize that I am now living in a way that does properly reflect this, and this is cause to celebrate.
Did you struggle with anything when you first became vegan, whether it was friends or family?
Yeah, so I think the biggest way in which I struggled 13 years ago as a new vegan was that I didn't really know how to effectively communicate. And what I would do is I was sort of stuck in the angry vegan phase, and I would kind of just like um, almost like launch verbal assaults at people, at my friends and my family members, and say like, "Wow, farm animals endure this, this, and this, and this, and this, and you should be vegan because of this, this, and this, and this. And this is how you do it. This, and this, and this." After they did not ask me a single question about veganism, show any interest in animal advocacy or vegan food or anything. And what I did was I alienated a lot of people, and I put them on the defensive, and I really, I kind of turned them off a little bit from the concept. And what I realized was that I should actually let people come to me, and if I want to do outreach, I should focus on people who aren't already in my circles. Because if I'm focusing on just my friends and family, then and I'm doing this over and over, I'm going to start harming some relationships that I have. And so I think it might be a more effective approach to kind of focus my activism and my advocacy on the vast majority of the general public out there, which is, again, 95% of the population who we can reach.
Now, did you harm any of your relationships?
I think, I eventually repaired these relationships, but I think that it definitely took a hit for a while. And I think that for a while I was probably viewed as kind of an annoying vegan. And I can't tell you how many times nowadays that people will know me for months or even years before they realize I'm vegan. Let's say people I play soccer with or something. And they're like, "Oh, wow, you're not like a lot of other vegans I know." And that's a sad state, is that one of those stereotypes that vegans can be a little bit annoying at times can sometimes be true because we don't approach people in the correct way. And it's important for us as animal advocates to not just be right, but to be effective. And we need to win hearts and minds, not arguments and debates. And it's not just important to just word vomit at people. It's important to have conversations and to come to people when the time is right.
I guess you went from the angry vegan phase to the leading by example phase.
Yes, but it took a long time to do that. I've been a vegan activist for about 13 years now, and it was a few years before I really got to a point where I was a pragmatic animal advocate who was strategically thinking about their communication. And so it's not something I expect everybody to be at, but it's something that everybody really needs to take a step back and analyze themselves and analyze how they're communicating with others and ask themselves, am I communicating in a way that is effective?
What is one thing that's exciting you right now in your life?
One of the things that is exciting me now in my life is actually the recent launch of my social media animal advocacy courses with Advocacy Collaborative. So last year I teamed up with Advocacy Collab, which is an online educational platform, to create three online courses, self-guided courses that are focused on social media advocacy. And so I just last Thursday I actually launched my third and final course called Mastering Social Media to Change the World. The first two courses were focused on individual platforms. The first course is on Twitter. The second course is on Instagram. And this course is for general social media advocacy. So it's for any social media advocate, or any animal advocate, or any advocate for any cause who uses social media to further their message. And so I'm very, very excited that this course is now out there in the world. And should any of your listeners be interested in enrolling in one of my courses, they can do so at the links in my social media platforms. You can also go to advocacycollab.com and find the courses there.
What do you want people to get out of your courses?
I want advocates to learn how to be more impactful advocates. Because if you're already going to spend, 30 minutes, 3 hours, 30 hours a week on social media advocacy, you might as well use that time more effectively. And all of us have room to grow. Even I have room to grow. But we all should really take the time and effort and resources that we're going to put forth onto something like animal advocacy on social media, for example, and really use our time as effectively as possible. And in these courses, I really have kind of step by step guides as far as how to incredibly effectively improve your advocacy on social media.
What is one tip that you can give our listeners right now to help them grow their social media?
One of the things that I would recommend is making content as personal as possible. So talking about your how you are impacted by particular content. So for example, talking about how the dog that you grew up with really inspired you to have a love and compassion for animals. To talk about how the video that your partner showed you of what animals are enduring behind the closed doors of factory farms really led you to change your behavior. As much as you can make it personal, the more impactful you will make it, especially because the people who are going to see your social media posts, especially the first before you start having more ripple effects, those are going to be your friends and family and colleagues and the people closest to you, and they care about you and they care about what you have to say. And so the more that you can put a face on animal advocacy, the more you can put a face on veganism, the better.
What is one habit, hack, or tip that helps you stay on track with your plant-based diet?
Well, something that I found to be really interesting after going vegan was uh, I began trying all these new foods I never would have tried if I hadn't gone vegan. So, if I hadn't gone vegan, I would have probably never eaten Ethiopian food, Indian food, Thai food,
Mm.
so many different interesting foods out there. I probably would have stuck to eating hamburgers, hot dogs, and chicken wings all the time. And so, what's beautiful about veganism is yes, you can still eat a lot of those same foods if you want. So, there are vegan versions of hot dogs, of hamburgers, of chicken wings, but there are also so many great plant based options out there that you should expose yourself to because it's fun and they're tasty. And it's really great to have a wider range of foods that you eat. And so I think that's kind of one of the benefits. So I don't think that non-vegans should look at going vegan as closing doors to foods. What they should really look at it as opening up doors to being exposed to so many new foods out there because the world is a big place and there are so many great foods out there to try.
What is it about animals and animal advocacy that makes you so passionate?
Well, for one, I mean, I just look at the innocence and the vulnerability of animals, and I feel a lot of empathy for them, and I really want them to live in ways that don't lead to them suffering. And I view suffering as just um, such a horrendous experience for any of us, and I view the fact that animals endure this suffering often behind the closed doors of factory farms and slaughterhouses so anonymously and in ways that don't need to happen. If the world absolutely needed to treat animals this way to survive, then I would have a different cause at my heart. But we can live in a way that doesn't hurt animals. And so that fact really inspires me every day to get out there and teach the world that what animals are enduring is an injustice and something that we need to change, and that each one of us can help change that through our choices.
Now, finally, can you give me one word to describe how you felt before you became vegan and one word to describe how you feel now that you are vegan?
Relieved. I would say that I am relieved to know that the way in which I'm living now matches up with the ethics that I have.
And do you have one word to describe how you felt before you were vegan?
One word to describe how I was prior to being vegan would be ignorant. And I mean that in the sense that I just didn't know, one, what animals endured, and two, how my impact on them or how I was impacting them through my food choices, and 3, how easy and amazing it would be to live and eat in a way that is much better for them, like eating vegan, for example.
Such a pleasure speaking with you. Thank you so much for taking the time. What is the best way for people to follow you and support you on social media?
Thanks, Fred. Well, this has been a real pleasure talking with you. And also, I want to let your listeners know that should they be interested in one of my online courses, the course that I just released most recently has multiple payment options. And one of the options is for it to be free enrollment if you need it to be. And that would just be using code FREE at checkout. And again, those courses are at advocacycollab.com. And now connecting with me on social media, you can find me on Twitter and on Instagram at John Oberg. That's JOHNOBERG. And then my Facebook page is at John Oberg Official.
Thanks again, John, for being on Plant Your Seed.
Thanks for having me, Fred. Thanks for all the work you're doing, and thanks for all the work and support from your listeners.
Hope you are inspired by this story, and remember, it's never too late to plant your seed. Links to everything we talked about on the podcast can be found on Instagram at plant.yourseed in the show notes tab in the bio. If you enjoyed the show, remember to leave us a review, and until next time, thank you for listening.